So now we know how to get all the information about a user's location. We're going to put this knowledge together and build an app called Hiker's Watch. And the app looks like this. So it's like one of those Hiker's Watches that gives you your GPS location and also a bit more information about your location as well, such as the level of accuracy, the altitude, and what a Hiker's Watch could never do, give you the actual address if there is one as well. So it's just an opportunity for you to practice the skills that we've learned in the last few videos. Notice as well that I've got a nice full screen image here. This is something we haven't done before, so you'll need to do a bit of Googling to figure out how to do that, but try and recreate the nice full screen background there. It's a nice thing to be able to have under your belt as an Android developer. And otherwise, everything should be reasonably straightforward. Best of luck. Go for it. All right then, here we go. Hope that went well. I'm going to start, of course, by creating a new project. And I'll call it Hiker's Watch. Miss out the apostrophe just in case it causes any problems. And we'll go for marshmallow and an empty activity. We're not going to be using a map this time. And we'll leave those as the default. While that's setting up, let's find a nice background image. One place that I go to quite often to find background images is unsplash.com. It's one of a fair few sites that you can use to get royalty-free photos for things like backgrounds and other parts of your apps. Now, as it happens, that first one looks pretty relevant. So I'm going to click download. And there we go, control click, save image as, or right click, save as on Windows. And I'm just going to call it background. Now it's likely that that image will be far bigger than you need. So as before, I'm going to quickly open it up in preview, tools, adjust size, and I'm going to change it to 1000 pixels in width, which should be perfectly fine. And I'm actually going to crop it a little bit for my phone screen as well. So I can do that using Command K. And there we go. That should make a nice background. So save. Obviously, when you're in Windows, you'll need to find a graphics tool to do something similar for you if you want to crop and resize images. Okay, so we're ready to go here in Android Studio. So I'm going to open up the project and I'm going to start by making the app full screen. There are many different ways to do this, so I hope you found one of them, but I think the easiest is to change the app theme, which you can do in Android manifest.xml. So just change the theme, so keep the style there, and then theme, and you can see it there, .appcompat, that will keep it compatible, and no action bar. So now if we run that app, we should see that it's displayed full screen. And there we go, you can see the Hello World is without the action bar there at the top. Great, so we've got our full screen, let's bring in our image. So I'm going to go over to Finder or Windows Explorer if you're on Windows, and then take my background.jpg file and paste it in. So I just did Command C or Control C on Windows and then select the drawable folder and then Command or Control V to paste that in. Now we'll go over to our layout. I'm going to get rid of the Hello World label. And I'm going to bring in an image view, which is now in Images and Media. There we go. And you can see that now in Android 2.2, we're immediately given the option to add an image resource to our image view. So I'll do that with our background image. And there we go. I'll have a quick look at the different options for scale type. Oh, that could work. I think that looks good. So I'm going to put the content of the app down on the left-hand side there in front of the trees. Great. One thing you might notice is that the app is not, or the image is not quite stretching to the edge of the app. That's because our relative layout has got some padding built in. So I'm going to click on relative layout, view all properties, and then change the padding for all of those to 0. There we go. I'll just run that to take a look in a moment, make sure everything's laid out appropriately. While that's running, we'll add in our first text view. So we're going to need a few of these. So the first one I'm going to have will be for my title. So I'm going to change the text to Hikers Watch. And then I'm just going to change the style a little. So we'll look for the text size. There's a lot of options here. So we're on 14 SP at the moment. Let's change that to 20 SP. Or 24. It's in the drop down. Great. That looks good. Just drag it up slightly. Excellent. And now let's bring in some labels for our location information. We'll start with latitude and longitude. So this will be our latitude. And I'm just going to put some default values in for the moment. And we'll need to change the color so that it looks good over those trees. So I think I'll just go for plain white. And we'll change the size as well. 16 should work. Great. Okay, now I'm going to jump over to the text view here. And just show you how we can create a layout with the XML rather than drag and drop. So first off, I'm going to change the ID there to lat text view. And then I'm going to copy and paste all of that down. So now here we should be below lat text view. We'll change the text to longitude. We'll change the margin top to something like 12 dps. And we'll change the ID here to lon text view. There we go. I think maybe I'll reduce that slightly, bring them a little bit closer together. And then we'll leave the rest for the moment until we see what data we actually get back from the location object, and then we'll add the extra text views in when we're ready. Okay. So let's jump over to main activity and write our code for getting the user's location. So hopefully you remember that we start by creating our location manager, which we'll call location manager. And then we create our location listener. And we bring in those classes. And then when the app is ready, we'll set up our location manager. And we're going to cast this to a location manager type from this .get system service, and then context dot location service is what we want. Then we set up our location listener, which is going to be a new location listener. And on location changed is where we want to do something with our location. And for now, we'll just convert it to a string and put it in the logs. Like that. Okay, then we need to set up our location listener by asking for permission. So as we're hopefully now fairly comfortable with, we look for a build version SDK of less than 23. And if that's the case, we set up our location manager to start requesting location updates using the GPS provider. And we'll stick with 00, so it will update with no minimum time or distance requirement from the previous update. And it's a location listener that we want to deal with the new location. If that's not the case, i.e. we're running Marshmallow or above, then we need to ask for permission. Or more precisely, we need to check whether or not we've got permission. And we do that using context compatibility and then check self permission. We're checking this activity and we're checking manifest.permission.access find location. And we want to check to see if that's not equal to package manager.permission granted. That actually reminds me to add the permission in to the manifest. Let's do that now. So access find location. Don't forget to do that. Okay. So if permission is not granted, then we need to ask for permission. And we do that using activity compatibility dot request permissions. And we want to request them for this activity. And we're going to create a new array of strings, which will just contain a single string, which is manifest.permission.access find location. And we also send our request code, which I'll just keep as number 1. And then finally, for this section of code, if this is not the case, that means we have permission. So we can start listening for location. And also, while we're here, we have permission on the app launch. Then we can do something with that location. Now we want to do quite a lot with the location, even though we're just initially putting it in the logs. So I think what I'm going to do is create a method called update location info. And this will take a location variable, which we'll call location. And for now, it will just log that. But of course, later on, we'll use that to update our Hiker's Watch page. And so we'll add that here, but we need to get the last known location. which we do using location manager dot get last known location from the GPS provider. And then I think I'll do a quick check, because there's always a possibility that there isn't a last known location. So if location is not null, then we'll call the update location info method. Okay, so now we should get a hit to the logs when we first run the app if we've already got permission. If we haven't got permission, then we need to be able to process when the user gives us permission. And we do that, of course, with onRequestPermissions result. There it is. So as before, we'll check to see if grant results dot length is greater than 0 and grant results 0 is equal to package manager dot permission granted. So if that's the case, then we have permission, but we still actually have to check that we have permission. Even though we know that we've been given permission, our code won't compile unless we explicitly check for that permission. So again, this manifest permission access find location. And this time we want to check that that's equal to package manager dot permission granted. And if that's the case, then we can start our location manager going. And in fact, it would probably be worth creating a method to do that. So I'll call it start listening. It doesn't need any variables, but we can just put our check in there. Like that. And then we can just refer to that each time that we need to. Okay, so let's now give it a try. We should, of course, now be asked for the user's location. And if we get it, then it should appear in the logs every time it's updated. Here we go. So it's asking for permission. We'll tap allow and then make a small update to the location, send that through, and let's have a quick look. It should appear in our logs. And there it is. So we've got the GPS location there. We've also got the accuracy. We've got the time, which I'm not going to display to the user, and the altitude as well. Great. So let's now add in our other items to our user interface. I'm going to do that by copying this text view. So this is going to be our accuracy text view. We're going to align it below the longitude text view. I'm going to give it a bit more of a margin just to space it out a little bit. Zoom in a little there for you. And then I'll change that to accuracy. And then similarly for altitude. So this will be alt text view, and it will be below accuracy text view. And finally, we'll anticipate what's coming next with our address text view. Let's position this right. So we want it to be below the alt text view, and we want to have an ID of address text view. And then we're going to have multiple lines in this address text view. Well done if you managed to figure out how to do that. We use \n to generate a new line. There we go. So that will do for now. So I'm actually going to update these labels before we get the address data. Could really do it the other way around. It doesn't matter too much. But we're going to do that here in the update location info. So let's again remind us what we get from our location object. We've got our location, accuracy, and altitude. So we're going to need to find our various text views. So let's start with lat text view. So we're going to need to convert that to a text view. And we're going to get it from find view by ID, resources.ids.lat text view. And while we're doing that, we'll set up the rest. So we've got lon text view. We've got altitude text view. And we've got accuracy text view. And then we just want to set each of those appropriately. So lat text view. Set text. And we want this to be latitude. And then we're going to take our location object and get latitude. Similarly, lon text view will set the text to longitude. So that's location.get longitude. Then we'll take out alt text view, so altitude, and set the text to altitude, and then location.get altitude. And finally, accuracy. We'll set the text there to accuracy, and then, whoops, not altitude, but accuracy. All right, so let's try that out. And then if that works, all that remains is to add our user's address. And here we go. You can see we've already got the latitude, longitude, accuracy, and altitude in there. Just to make sure altitude is working, if I change that to 12 meters here, then that updates nicely there as well. I'm going to leave the latitude and longitude with a slightly ridiculous number of decimal places, but you could quite easily round that if you want to. I've just noticed as well that my hiker's watch at the top is white. I was fairly sure I changed that, but just in case whatever I did didn't work. Let's go back and find the text color. Here we go. So I'll click on the three dots and then color. And then we'll go for that dark, sort of almost black color. Excellent. So all looking good. All that remains is to get our address. And we do that, if you remember, by creating a geocoder object. So geocoder with a capital G. We'll call it geocoder. And this is going to be a new geocoder using the application context and the default, i.e. the user's locale. Then we're going to create our list of addresses, which I'll call list addresses. And we're going to take our geocoder and get the information from a location, and that location is going to be location.getLatitude, location.getLongitude, and we're only interested in one result here. That of course could fail, so we're going to surround it with try and catch. Just like that. And for now, before we update everything, I'm just going to add that to the logs. So log.i place info, and this will be list addresses.get, and we want the first item in the array, and we're going to convert that to a string. Oh, strictly speaking though, I should first check to make sure that there is indeed an address for us. So if list addresses is not null and list addresses dot size is greater than 0, then we'll write that to the logs. There we go. All right, so let's see that in action. We should now get some location data, obviously not displayed for the user yet, but in the logs. And there it is. So there's our address, Hexton Road, Lily, etc. Excellent. So now it's just a matter of doing more or less what we did in the challenge at the end of the previous video and putting this into a nice, friendly format for the user. And I'm going to do that by creating a string called address, and initially I'm going to call that could not find address. So if it does fail, then at least we get a nice error message rather than just nothing, or worse, that it just leaves it as the old address. So now we need to do our fairly lengthy checking of each item in list address. So we'll go through this as quickly as possible. So list addresses get 0 to get our address. And we'll start with the sub thoroughfare. So if that is not null, then we'll append to address that value. There we go. And one thing I should do actually is set the address to an empty string once we know that we are successful. And we'll pop a space on the end there as well. Then we'll do the same thing for the thoroughfare, but this time we'll add a \n after the thoroughfare. Then we want the locality, again with a \n. And then we want the postal code or zip code, and finally we'll have the country name. Great, so now we've got the address all ready to go. We need to update the text view. So let's create a new text view called address text view. And we'll need to convert that to a text view, and we'll find it using find view by ID, resources.id.address text view. And then we'll take our address text view and set the text to address. And notice that we're doing that whether or not we were successful at getting the address. But if we're not successful for any reason, then it will say could not find address. Okay, let's take a look. Wonderful. So you can see we've got that address now. One thing I have noticed there is that we could do with starting the address with address, and also a small thing, but let's remove our fake street. I'll do it in the text view and just leave that as is. Okay, quick final check then to see everything in action. It should all behave now exactly as we want. And there we go. Looks great. And if we update, obviously anything here, then we'll get our data updated immediately on the app. Fantastic. So I hope you enjoyed that one. In the next video, we're going to prepare for the final app of this section, which is the biggest app that you've built so far, an app called Memorable Places. And that app actually requires more than one activity. So we're going to have multiple screens for the user to be working with. And that's what we're going to find out how to do in the next video. See you there.